Good morning, everyone. Mike and Corey here today. The last day before a holiday tomorrow, July 4th. We are on today with three topics. First, I'm going to talk about the new jobs report number that came out today, which actually conflicted with yesterday's. Very interesting there. Then we'll talk very briefly about the process of that big bill, where that stands, big, beautiful, whatever we want to call it, but where that stands in approval. And then Corey's going to dive into, is Chairman Powell right? And get into some discussion there, which will be very interesting to hear. I'm looking forward to this. So as we get started, this financial education presentation, you must do your own due diligence on anything you hear in this presentation. More disclaimer information can be found on ankerstarwealth.com, and the opinions expressed are mine and Corey's alone. So yesterday, I led off with this big topic right here. It said, wow, the private sector lost 33,000 jobs. They badly missed the expectations for 100,000. And then today, we get another jobs report from the government. But I did see this article yesterday that said, and the article's titled, let me see here, it's titled, Be Very Skeptical of the ADP report yesterday. So it's, even in the financial world, you think, you would have, like, we all agree on the same thing if it's a number, right? It's not subjective. And yet, look, here's what it came out and said. It says the ADP comes from the customers of these companies that does the wages and taxes for 25 million of workers. So they got a pretty good finger on the pulse, you would think. 25 million workers out of whatever, how many, 160 million, whatever there is. That's a pretty good finger on the pulse. Seems like that would be statistically significant, if you remember that from high school or college. However, they say in the past, these things there's some wild variance. And here is what we found today is it was a wild variance. So instead of being down 33,000, instead it's up 147,000, which is even higher than the estimate of 110,000. So, which was the original estimate. So what led it, and keep in mind, ADP does private employers. Government jobs was the biggest driver. And I'm going to show you this graph right here, which shows 73,000 new jobs in the government. Now, when I see this, I'm kind of like, whoa, wait a second. I thought DOGE was cutting government jobs and all this. But these jobs tend to be at the local and state level, so not the federal government. So that's a big driver. Healthcare, guess what? People are getting older, need more healthcare, social assistance, makes sense. Leisure, it's the summer. Construction. And then, you see things like even information or the computer science world being kind of break even. Business services actually down 7,000. So kind of stunning to see this big change. And one other kind of keynote, I could scroll down and find it here, and I'm going to stop scrolling. But the unemployment rate went down to 4.1%. So it was at 4.3. It went down to 4.1. And they say the primary reason is less about lots of jobs are being created, although some are. It's the workforce is growing smaller. So that overall divisor, the bottom number, if you remember division, I hope I'm saying that correctly. But that bottom number, the number of people that are wanting jobs is declining. Aging workforce, people retiring. Throw on, I don't know how much deportations are impacting this. So guess what? You could keep your jobs the same, but if you decrease the workforce, the unemployment rate goes down. So very interesting there. And then last, I'll just hit real briefly. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this till it's actually passed, but the House vote on the big, beautiful bill is very, very close. I know Trump wanted this thing by July 4th. They're supposed to be doing this vote. I don't know if it's later today, but they worked on it overnight and got some of the holdouts to kind of agree. So this thing should pass soon, whether you like it or not. What we'll do is once it gets passed, we'll dive into it, how it actually impacts us from a tax and investing standpoint. So Corey, what do you think? Big, beautiful bill. I'm not a big fan of the title. I don't know.
It's a come on, it's right on brand. You know that. It's right on brand.
Could we just call it, I guess we had the Inflation Reduction Act and it didn't really do that.
Oh, that
So,
was yeah.
so I mean, we could,
1.7 trillion of
I don't even
spend.
know.
Oh, that's so funny.
I think they should use Chat GPT and say, give me 20 better names for this and pick one of those.
Yeah. All right, I want to hit on this, so let's carry on. Let's piggyback on what Mike said. That unemployment rate is not increasing. There's a gentleman in the world, Jerome Powell, who is chairman of the Fed. He's getting a lot of heat for not lowering rates yet. And of course, it's not entirely his decision. There is a committee here, and it's kind of a team thing, but all the heat falls onto him. Now, he was speaking this week, and he had a quote out that said, "We went on hold when we saw the size of the tariffs, and essentially all inflation forecasts for the United States went up materially as a consequence of the tariffs." All right, so a couple issues here with, maybe some of the logic or some of the people who are attacking the logic. So the Federal Reserve has that dual mandate there. And they need to control unemployment to the best of their ability, and control inflation to the best of their ability. So right now, do we have a lot of inflation? No, we don't. And do we have unemployment problems? No, we don't. Mike, kind of reiterated some of the nuance around that, but for right now, we're kind of in a sweet spot. So that's why market is happy. The market's not going to be unhappy until we're out of the sweet spot for real. Now, there's always threats that could push us out of that sweet spot, but until they really materialize in the data, you're not going to see the market stay down for a long period of time. Okay, so the here's where people are kind of attacking the Fed's logic here. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be data dependent. They're not supposed to forecast anything. They're kind of supposed to be more reactionary versus, trying to predict what will happen next. And they'll say that. They'll say we're data dependent. We're just looking at whatever data comes across. There has been some softening data around housing starts and some important pieces of the economy, but nothing too extreme. It would be easy to justify some cuts at this point, just being where inflation is and where the Fed's overnight rate is. You've got a really large gap there. You probably don't need that large of a gap, but you can kind of see where some cuts would be okay. Certainly not looking at rate increases on the data that's out there. Now, the Federal Reserve coming out and saying, oh, well, we're kind of speculating about the impact of tariffs. That is what people get upset about, whether that be the president or others, skeptics out there, because that's really not what the Federal Reserve should be doing. They shouldn't be speculating, at least according to what, lots of people think, and according to kind of what the Federal Reserve says about being data dependent. Now I'm going to present two things that may paint the picture that the Federal Reserve might be right here. So let's go first. We do have an effective tariff rate about 15%. It's actually changes. It's still changing a lot. There was a deal yesterday done with Vietnam at a 20%. That one was 20%. And, there was relief. Actually, Vietnam stock market hit all-time highs overnight last night, in reaction to that. So fair enough. But the tariffs are still elevated. Now, here's the other thing. So we can accept tariff rates in general will be elevated compared to our kind of what we've been used to in the past, well, for most people's lifetimes, right? We do have this thing where companies are very smart. So companies were leading into the inauguration, they were ramping up. I guess the President Trump was talking about tariffs, and things leading up to the inauguration and so on. Companies were basically stopped. So just in normal market environments, you're going to have at least 90 days of inventory already in the system from other countries, right? So that'd be 3 months. Well, companies front loaded even more and stockpiled inventory probably that will last them to the fall, early fall. So, in some sense, and now you've seen ocean booking volumes kind of fall off a cliff, and they've been hovering at a low level. Companies aren't going to be able to wait forever. I think a lot of companies are hoping that there's resolution here, and then they can get a lower tariff rate established, increase orders again after that lower tariff rate is established. But they're not going to be able to wait forever. So, there is a case to be made where Jerome Powell and the Fed might be right here. They maybe see this dynamic and see that, hey, these companies won't be able to hold out forever if it's a negotiating tactic or whatever. Eventually, this stuff is going to filter through the system and be inflationary. And, and obviously, you get inflation on some goods, it kind of destroys some buying power and all that. But, Mike, what do you think the Fed is right to have waited?
Yeah, I do think they're correct to wait. I mean, the economy is doing pretty well. I mean, I know the stock market likes cheap money. Companies like cheap money. It's like, of course, we all do. We want lower interest rates, but I do think the Fed has made the right decision to wait. Is there a concern on the inflationary side? I do think at some point, remember, inflation is too much money and not enough goods. So when you see like a shipping chart like that, and not as many goods are coming in, at some point when that inventory runs out, then you have the situation of not enough goods and too much money, and that's what causes inflation. So we'll see if it really comes, charging back. Sadly, I think, maybe we're going to see Powell add to the unemployment rate himself. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he might be putting in his first time unemployment claim, this fall or whenever. I don't know. So I hope not. I do think he's done a great job. So we'll see. It's a battle. That's why the Fed remains independent. So that's my 2 cents.
Good stuff.
Awesome. Everybody have a great 4th of July weekend. Enjoy your time with family, friends, and do some barbecue. Hopefully get some good weather. Travel. Enjoy life. It's a nice long weekend. So have a great one. Bye.